In a few moments, you will witness not only the sinking of a ship, but the collapse of one of the greatest illusions in human history. This is not the story of an accident. This is the story of a single night that changed everything. At the beginning of the 20th century, the world was changing rapidly. The Industrial Revolution had placed steel, steam, and machines at the center of human life. And the Atlantic Ocean had become the main artery of this new world. Hundreds of thousands of migrants crossing from Europe to America. Wealthy passengers, trade ships. Transatlantic travel had turned into a gold mine for giant companies. Two companies were in open competition. One wanted to win with speed, the other with splendor. White Star Line made a clear decision. We will not build the fastest ship in the world. We will build the largest, the most luxurious, and the most magnificent ship ever created. With that decision, the fate of the Titanic began to be written even before construction started. In 1908, thousands of workers began construction in the shipyards of Belfast. The sound of hammers did not stop for days, months, and years. Nearly 14,000 men worked day and night. What emerged was the largest moving object ever created by human hand. The ship was 269 meters long, 46,000 tons in weight, equipped with 16 watertight compartments. And engineers said, even if 4 compartments are flooded, this ship will not sink. The press carried this sentence to the headlines. The unsinkable ship. This phrase never appeared in any official document, but it settled deeply into the public's mind. And right here, the seed of disaster was planted. Because people become careless with things they believe cannot fail. On the morning of April 10th, 1912, the ship left the harbor on its maiden voyage. More than 2,000 people were on board, the richest people in the world, immigrant families, servants, engineers, crew members. And on the bridge stood an experienced captain, Edward John Smith. This was to be his final voyage. He would retire after this journey, but there was haste on this crossing. The company wanted to show the world how fast and powerful the ship truly was. The press was expecting records. And so, despite the ice warnings, speed was not reduced. Throughout the voyage, the ship received multiple warning messages. Different ships reported large icebergs in this area. The route is dangerous. Heavy ice ahead. But most of these messages were never delivered to the bridge or were simply ignored. Why? Because the wireless room was overloaded with private messages from first-class passengers. These messages were paid. They meant profit. The operators, the priority was clear. Messages that made money, not warnings that saved lives. This was the first broken link in a deadly chain. On the night of April 14th, the weather was unnaturally calm. The sea was almost like glass. There was no moon. The horizon was barely visible. For sailors, these are some of the most dangerous conditions, because without waves, no foam forms around an iceberg, and ice appears only as a dark shadow in the darkness. That night, the atmosphere also created a rare optical effect. Scientists today call this atmospheric refraction. This effect blurs distant objects. It makes them appear later than they should. In other words, the iceberg was seen too late. Did the lookouts have binoculars? They did, but they were locked in a cabinet, and no one knew where the key was. The truth is this: even with binoculars, under these conditions, seeing the iceberg earlier would still have been extremely difficult. At 11:39 p.m., the lookout saw a dark shape ahead. He rang the bell 3 times. Iceberg! First Officer Murdoch gave an immediate order. Hard to starboard! Stop the engines! This decision was the most fatal mistake of the entire night. Because modern simulations now show something terrifying. If the ship had not turned at all, and had struck the iceberg head-on, it would likely have damaged only 2 compartments, and the ship would not have sunk. But by turning, the ship scraped along the iceberg. This was the worst possible scenario. From the outside, there was no massive hole. But Beneath the water, rivets were tearing out one by one. At 6 different points, a long, thin tear, nearly 9 meters in length, formed along the hull. It was like a knife cut. Water began to pour in silently, and the so-called watertight compartments were open at the top. Water spilled from one compartment to the next. This was the greatest flaw in the design. Captain Smith called the ship's designer Thomas Andrews. Andrews went down and inspected the lower decks. When he returned, he said only one sentence. "At most, we have an hour and a half." From that moment on, in truth, everyone knew the ship could not be saved. But the passengers were not clearly informed to avoid panic. But this decision cost thousands of people their most precious resource, time. There were more than 2,000 people on board, but the lifeboats could carry only 1,178. Why? Because regulations required lifeboats based on the ship's tonnage, not on the number of passengers. And the company believed that too many lifeboats would look ugly on the deck. Many lifeboats were lowered half empty because people still believed the ship would not sink. Meanwhile, third-class passengers struggled to reach the upper decks. Some doors were closed. Some corridors were blocked. That night, class division became deadly. Distress calls were sent. The nearest ship was only 32 kilometers away, the Californian. But its radio was turned off. Rockets were fired. The crew of the Californian saw them, but the captain was unsure whether they were emergency signals, and he went back to bed. That decision cost hundreds of lives. At 2:20 a.m., the ship disappeared beneath the surface. More than 1,500 people fell into the freezing sea.
And that was that. She stopped. We had a porthole open, and I looked out, and the sky was clear, stars were shining, the sea was dead calm. And I thought, I don't know, I couldn't understand it. So I came out of my cabin, and I thought, well, I'd go forward. And I went forward to the well deck on the starboard side, and I could see ice in the well deck. There's no sign of iceberg then, because she'd passed us. And the lights were shining on the water from the portholes, and no sign of damage above waterline. And of course, what had happened, we slipped over the iceberg. And although she was supposed to be unsinkable with a double bottom, the iceberg had cut her from forward on the starboard side to the engine room, almost amidships, right through her 2 bottoms. And we had orders to get the lifeboats out. And of course the order, the same old order, women and children. And we swung the lifeboats out and gradually filled them up. First boats were away on the port side. The first boats away didn't have many passengers on board. They were afraid to go down. There was a 70-foot drop to the water, and they didn't think she was going to sink. And a few of the first boats on the port side got away with half filled. Don't forget, we had 16 lifeboats, and they each carried 50. And if they'd been filled, we could have saved 800, whereas we only saved 500. So you can imagine there were many seats in the first lifeboats vacant.
The water temperature was near zero. In such water, within 5 minutes, muscles stiffen. Within 10 minutes, consciousness fades. Within 20 minutes, death becomes inevitable. Modern experiments prove this clearly. Most of those who entered the water did not drown. They died of cold. Today, scientists agree on one thing. There was no single cause that sank the Titanic. There was a chain. Speed was not reduced. Warnings were ignored. Weather conditions were extraordinary. A wrong maneuver was made. Design flaws existed. Lifeboats were insufficient. Help did not arrive. And all of these mistakes, on the same night, on the same ship, at the same moment, came together. When morning came, 1,500 people were gone. In a single night, families were destroyed, lives were erased, history was written, and Titanic was not only a ship, it became the most expensive lesson ever written by human pride. Take your place for our next video, where we will share even deeper secrets of the Titanic. See you in the next episode.